Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. There's an old prophecy amongst the Eliksni, one that represents hope to them and the return to their seemingly rightful place within the cosmos. That prophecy is told amongst many others, and yet it rises to supersede them. It has compelled their long exodus from Reese, their military assaults against the lost city, and even the basic structures of their society that were maintained through their societal collapse. It's not clear when nor how this myth or prophecy arose exactly, but it is clear that it arose thanks to the House of Rain, who originally tried to settle Mercury and who were swiftly lost to the Vex and a certain legendary Titan. The most enduring legacy of that house was this. The prophecy is one that has been mantled by the greatest leaders of Eliksni society. The prophecy has been used to motivate and manipulate everyone from the great archons of the high houses to the lowliest of dregs. The prophecy is so central to the Eliksni that it's hard to imagine their current society without it in some iteration. For those of you who are well versed in the lore, you will know what I'm talking about. For those that don't, know that I am referring to the prophecy of the Kell of Kells. Today we're going to talk about that prophecy and how it may now still be of importance and relevance today. But first, a word from our sponsors at Keeps. I'm sure by this point that all of you fellas out there know that 2 out of 3 of you will experience some kind of hair loss by the age of 35. But you can prevent that with the clinically proven research-backed hair loss treatments provided by Keeps. Get quality care from experts straight to your door without any hassle. Thanks to Keeps doctors, you can get a treatment plan recommended to you that is right for you and your goals. Each treatment plan comes with a full year of unlimited messaging, so you can connect with your prescribing doctor at any time. Whether you're looking to prevent hair loss, stimulate hair growth, or just take better care of yourself and your hair, Keeps has you covered. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/bife or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/bife. Thank you very much to Keeps for sponsoring this video. Anyway, back to the lore. So what is the prophecy of the Kell of Kells exactly? Well, thanks to some ancient quest lore notations saved by the wondrous team at the IshtarCollective.net, we have 2 stanzas of it. Just 2. These are all we know, but it is easily enough to understand the prophecy as a whole. Take a listen. The great machine will marvel, moved by might, and come to crown him Kell of Kells. What whirlwind whisked away will be rewrought, and every Kell and Ketch will kneel to the Kell of Kells. House Rain's prophecy might be more than just these 2 lines. It might just be these 2 lines. It may have more significant cultural implications than those I'll talk about today. It's probably only thanks to figures such as Varix the Loyal of the House of Judgment that we even understand anything close to a fraction of this prophecy. And it's probably down to him that it's even remembered at all properly. In his memory, he holds ancient knowledge of many things to do with the Eliksni, and perhaps it's then he who best understands what that means. The Kell of Kells is to the Eliksni an almost messianic figure, who represents more than just a supreme ruler who ascends to might through martial means. The Kell of Kells represents the ideas of redemption and regaining lost honor. To be seen as worthy once again in the eyes of the Great Machine, or the Traveler as we would call it, is in many ways the hope of many Eliksni. A hope so old that they have almost forgotten it. And yet, when it is roused and given to them as a notion or a suggestion, it is one that often binds them together. It represents even more than this though, as the Eliksni have come in their long drift to view servitors and other machines as sacred in a sense, although this practice of seeing machines as sacred may predate the long drift. Archons, who have always been the emissary between the prime servitors and the Kells, have often been referred to as priests, or have even been given other greater religious contexts within their names. Splicers, whose main function is to interface with machinery as well as to bioengineer in rarer cases, are often referred to as sacred figures because of how the Eliksni view machines. For a single Kel to rise above all others and to be proclaimed as the Kel of Kells by the Traveler itself, a machine known as the Great Machine to the Eliksni, is the closest thing within Eliksni society to a king being appointed by divine right, as was the idea presented in medieval societies. The big difference, of course, here is that the Eliksni understand the Traveler intimately and immediately, and they know that it is very much tangible. They have experienced its power. They have both gained and suffered thanks to it, when its power was either granted to them or taken away from them. They have seen its power rendered unto the guardians of the Last City in the form of the ghosts and the powers of the light, and so a figure claiming to be the Kel of Kells mantling such powers of the light, or even simply being chosen in some other way by the Traveler, would represent a figure almost worthy of worship to the Eliksni. To understand the prophecy of House Rain better, I think we need to first look at it in isolation and understand the time within which it was roughly made. We don't know the precise moment when it was written or interpreted or created by whatever means the House of Rain may have done so, or whether there were some factors that at the time lent it more legitimacy than some of us might know. But what we do know is the societal context around which it was written. It was written by the House of Rain before their fall at the close of the Long Drift. They did not survive the Whirlwind's final calamitous, disastrous events, and whilst they did reach Sol, they did not manage to survive their attempts to settle Mercury. This prophecy was built in a time of utter desperation for the Eliksni. The houses who were lost out in space had to resort to cannibalism and barbaric practices just to survive. The Eliksni's home system and home world of Reese had been completely destroyed. Millions, if not billions, might have died in the slaughter or in joining Chelchis' defense against the forces that pervaded them. I think that in a vacuum, an easy assumption to make from the perspective of the prophets of the House of Rain was simply that a people cannot survive on ether and food alone. They also need hope and leadership and structure. Creating a prophecy such as this would have solidified the command structure that still remained within their society, also known as the authority of the Kells. It would have given their people hope for redemption and to one day reclaim the Great Machine. This prophecy binds their people to authority, faith, and hope, all things that might help to maintain order in a near-apocalyptic situation for the Eliksni. After all, when your great god has fled you and you have nothing left, when the world is falling apart around you, what is there else but hope? And what binds to hope without reason, like faith? Something that demands that we do not necessarily put reason in stock. But of course, there has to be more to this prophecy than just its potential practicalities for the sake of survival in an apocalyptic scenario. I say that because the prophecy now has a history associated with it, and that history is almost as important as the simple idea of hope that the Eliksni gained from the prophecy. There are a number of figures that have looked to the prophecy of the Kel of Kells and have seen it as a means of propelling themselves to a position of authority. There are others who have seen figures of authority and have voluntarily graced them with the moniker of Kel of Kells. In particular, for the purposes of our story, there are 5 major characters I want to touch on, namely Skolas the Rabbit, Mara Sov, the Queen of the Reef, Varix the Loyal of House Judgment, Eramis, the former ship stealer and Kel of Darkness, and Mithrax, formerly Forsaken, now the Light Kel. Let's go through each of them and explain how the title relates to them. Skolas the Rabbit was the character at the center of the House of Wolves storyline in Destiny 1. He is probably the most infamous claimant to the title of Kel of Kells, as he proclaimed the moniker for himself after being granted both freedom from the Prison of Elders and a catch by the Nine. He He would use these boons to unite the forces of the Fallen Wolves with the forces of the House of Winter that had been left leaderless ever since we had taken out their Kell, Draxus. He didn't find such an easy time allying with the houses of Devils and Kings, though, and thanks to both Awoken and Guardian interference, he never gained their true allegiance. There were negotiations with the Kings, and there was a plot to force the Devils into servitude, but none of it ever truly panned out. After we captured him at the top of the Citadel on Venus, we would return Skolas to the Prison of Elders for a final trial by combat. He would ultimately be defeated, and his memory as the Kell to mantle the title of Kell of Kells would be remembered more for its hubris and mad ravings than its accuracy. Mara Sov was proclaimed a Kell of Kells in some ways by those fallen that wished to proclaim their loyalty to her after the first defeat of Skolas during the Reef Wars, an event that took place well before the House of Wolves expansion. Particularly after the Eliksni had been given the freedom to live alongside them in the Reef Wars, Mara Sov was seen as a uniter of the Eliksni in some manner, and one who had given them the opportunity to live in comfortable servitude. Though she never made any personal claim to the title of Kell of Kells, it would be accurate to say that some sycophants or pretenders that made up certain loyal or less than loyal Eliksni, such as Varix, had flattered her with the title. This title, of course, did little to armor the Queen and her guards against the Queenbreakers as they readied their bows and broke faith with the Queen at the onset of the House of Wolves expansion. When Skolas called, they saw him as a more worthy monarch, and ultimately, this led to their deaths as we hunted them down. Varix is related to the title partly because he was the greatest source of knowledge we had about it for a long time. During the time before the release of Forsaken, as he allowed the prison riot within the Prison of Elders to begin, he took all of his ether reserves and grew to the size of a Kell, proclaiming that he would mantle the position of Kell in order to help his people once again rise to power and prosperity. The prophecy of the Kell of Kells was at this point very much his inspiration, and it's noted by Vanguard reports that he would go around styling himself as the Kell of Kells before ultimately falling into the servitude of Eramis the ship stealer as she rose from the prison riots to become an infamous pirate and then the Kell of the House of Salvation. Eramis's own position is one that can sometimes be referred to as the Kell of Kells, but not in the traditional sense. Whilst the feeling seems to be that for most claimants to the title, the Traveler would acknowledge their might with blessings, I think the title bestowed on Eramis here is instead bestowed with an acknowledgement that she would bring the Traveler to heel and make it suffer at her wrath. Upon releasing her wrath upon the Great Machine, she would perhaps proclaim herself to be the Kell of Kells and Kell of Darkness. The part where it says that the Great Machine will marvel at the Kell of Kells' might is to be taken very literally in this instance if you're to believe Eramis's claim to the title. She has little interest in mantling such a title, though, for its prophetic intentions most certainly do refer to the Traveler as good, and ultimately I feel as though she has deliberately not fed into such myths. She has, in a certain sense, been one of two great uniters of the Eliksni people in current times, and not only provided many Eliksni with stable leadership, but a great degree of real power that allowed her and her closest lieutenants to fight back against the Guardians. In addition to this, she set up the closest thing to a fallen metropolis that has existed in Sol to this point, in the form of Rhys Reborn, a settlement built into the European remains of the city that was standing near the Clovis Bray Deep Stone Crypt facility. Of course, the ruins of Eventide may seem empty to some, but the reality is that the House of Salvation still makes its home there, and within lies an incredible degree of machinery and a well-constructed military-industrial complex from which Eramis may strike out. Finally, and perhaps most importantly of all, we have Mithrax, formerly known as the Forsaken, now known as Mithrax the Light Kell. Mithrax has not claimed the title, but his powerful uniting presence and message has often gone a long way towards earning him the moniker. Everyone, from random Eliksni out in the system to the Drifter to even Saint 14, have called him the Kell of Kells. He does have a unique claim as the leader of the House of Light that allows him to more adequately hold the title than others. He has worked alongside the Travelers Chosen in the form of the Guardians, and now holds residence beneath the Traveler with his house, and has begun to return his people to many of the cultural ways that were present before the Whirlwind. What older principles they may have held is one thing, but it's also fair to say that Mithrax is a mighty warrior, a sacred splicer, and a capable leader, and all of these different factors have only bound him further towards making the claim more real. So, which amongst these figures might be the one to unite the Eliksni and to be considered by their great machine? Nobody knows. The prophecy might not even be true, but quietly I have a theory. The Eliksni prophecy of the House of Rain may or may not turn out to be true, but the Witch Queen campaign has proven to us that humanity, the Exos, and the Awoken are not the only species capable of being blessed by the Traveler's light. The Hive Guardians stand as proof to this, and it was not because they captured ghosts. These ghosts chose to resurrect the Hive. More importantly than all of this, it would be important to understand then that the Hive are not the last to receive the Traveler's light. In fact, you can remember back to the beginning of Destiny 2 when Gaul technically forced the light of the Traveler into himself, and therefore gained some of its powers. But this then proves only something further, that the Eliksni might in fact become Guardians. And this is where I think we really need to look at everything that the Traveler has done before, to understand what it might do next. I think there would be a worthy irony in the idea of Eramis being killed, and then being found worthy because of her past life, where she was a devoted partner to her wife, and a mother to her hatchlings, as well as a defender of those before her time in the Long Drift when she was lost. But that's still not the greatest assertion, I think, that one could make. I think, and this is my own personal theory, but one that I'm certainly not holding alone, that the one who might end up fulfilling the prophecy of the Kell of Kells is in fact Ido, Mithrax's daughter. She has been known for the longest time by the moniker of Child of Light, and is trained to be worthy of standing by the Guardians. She needs a lot of work with firearms, of course, but the entire point of the Truth Quest back in the Forsaken Season of Opulence was simply this idea of making sure that Ido was capable of standing on her own 2 feet and performing her duties alongside the Guardians in a worthy fashion. It would be awful to see her die, but I feel like such a moment would make Ido a worthy leader of the Eliksni. And she has even repeated the motto of the Guardians, that devotion inspires bravery, bravery leads to sacrifice, and sacrifice leads to death. One of those main priorities that Ido holds, however, is simply this. It is not about violence and control, it is about peace and unity. One who rules through the might of knowledge instead of the strength of arms might have a chance to ultimately bring peace to the Eliksni people. And perhaps most importantly of all, this idea is one that Mithrax shares. In Ido, he sees the first real chance for peace in generations. So, that's my take. What's yours? Let me know down below in the comments section. And of course, do let me know what your thoughts are as well about the Season of the Plunder. Do you reckon that we'll see some of this start to play out? What do you reckon the takeaway is going to be between Eramis and Mithrax? Do you reckon that Ido is involved in the wider story? Let me know. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you would like more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Porodacia Arastra. I'll see you, Starside.